Well, happy Halloween. This happens to be one of my favorite times of year, and but I don't get trick or treaters anymore. I live way out, so I don't get to enjoy that. Just me and the critters. But it's been a while since I've been on my videos in person. So for Halloween, I thought I would kind of kick back and go through some real live scary stories of places that I've actually been. Now, for some of you that have followed my channel, you know that I live here in the Ozarks and I actually live on a haunted property up above a haunted cave. And you can go through and see some of those videos where I tell the story of that. And there was actually a book written about it called The Headless Cobbler of Smollett Cave. So, but tonight we're not going to get into that because when I was younger, for a while, I did spend 10 years in Nebraska. So the stories I'm going to tell tonight is going to be from that area. So I guess I'll start out with, um, take you back to 1916. And back in 1916, there was a man in Council Bluffs, Iowa. That's right there on the border of Omaha. And his name was General Grenville Dodge. And he was very well known for probably being the best railroad builder ever. And in 1916, January of 1916, Grenville Dodge died. And he left behind his wife, Ruth Ann Dodge. And soon after he had died, her health started waning. And when that happened, um, she had the course of three dreams. And in the first dream, there she saw a boat coming towards her. And on this boat was an angel. And once the boat reached her, the angel held its hands out with a bowl and wanted her to drink out of the bowl. But she refused. Then she had a second dream. Again, the boat came her way, and there was an angel held out the bowl, and she refused to drink again. Then she had a third dream. Once again, the boat came, the angel reached out its hands with the bowl, and this time she drank from the bowl. And she told her daughters of this dream. And soon after this last dream, she died. So her daughters wanted to commemorate her and the unusual dreams that she had had before she died, and they had decided to have a statue built of an angel over her grave in her memory and the memory of her dreams. So they were going to spare no expense, and they got a sculptor. I think his name was Daniel Chester French, and I guess he was very well known for his sculpting. I believe he even, I guess, if you've even seen the Lincoln Monument, that is his work. So back during that time, there was a woman. She was like, I guess, what you could consider a supermodel, um, and her name was Audrey Munson. And Audrey Munson, she posed for all kinds of sculptors and artists of that time, very well known. And so that's what the daughters did. They had hired him. Audrey Munson was the sculptor's muse, and he had created this angel. And the angel was erected in 1922 there in the cemetery, but there wasn't no big fanfare or anything when they did it because around the time that this was supposed to happen, a scandal involving Audrey Munson had kind of came about. And what had happened is Audrey and her mother lived in a boarding house that was owned by this, I think it was Dr. Wilkins, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Wilkins and his wife, and um, Audrey. Well, one day Audrey and her mother decided to leave just a few days before this happened. And what had happened was, for some reason, um, Mr. Dr. Wilkins murdered his wife brutally. And some say that he had killed his wife so he could be with Audrey, even though there is no record of him or her ever having any type of relationship like that at all. He always denied killing his wife, but he was sentenced and eventually put to death. And even upon his death, he um, still said that he was innocent of doing that crime. But when that happened, Audrey, the whole scandal just absolutely ruined her career. And of course, the family, with this going on, that's why they didn't have much of a fanfare over this statue. But the tragedy doesn't end there because after all of this, and Audrey couldn't find work, it just destroyed her. She became very depressed and tried killing herself. And shortly after that, her mother ended up admitting her into a mental institution where Audrey stayed for the last 65 years of her life with no visitors, totally forgotten. And Audrey finally died in 1996 at the age of 104. So, with all the scandal and the tragedy of Audrey's life, this statue became known as the Black Angel. So, here we fast forward to the 1980s. And this is when I was younger. And a friend of mine, me and her, we had went to this big library near downtown Omaha. And afterwards, she got the wild idea, let's go see the Black Angel. I was like, well, yeah, why not? So we drove over to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and she got out of the car and she pointed to where it was, but she wouldn't come with me. And the story of the Black Angel is that there's these stairs that go up to the cemetery, and they say that stairs change numbers. And then also, if you touch the statue, goodness, um, that you will be cursed. So there I am, late at night. She won't come with me. And so I slowly walk up these stairs. And when I get to the top, I see this huge statue of this dark angel. And I went up to the angel. I never did touch it, and I didn't count the stairs. But I stood in front of the angel, and I don't know if it was because it being nighttime and you had all the light that you stood up there and you could see all the lights of the city. So that as a background and the moon shining down. And here I am in front of this huge statue of this angel. And the only thing I can say, I never felt anything strange when I was there. And despite all of its dark history and how it was created and why it was created, standing there, I thought it was one of the most beautiful statues I had ever seen. So that was my experience, and it's still there. You can go and visit it. But that was not my first adventure in Nebraska. There was another time, this would have been around 1981, when me and my boyfriend at the time, he decided he was going to take me out to a place in rural Papillion in Sarpy County, Nebraska, a rural area where there sat an old schoolhouse. So we drove out there and we get up to this old schoolhouse. This is just a tiny one room schoolhouse, kind of like you would see on Little House on the Prairie. But this was old, it was boarded up, and he began to tell me the story of this schoolhouse, which it was originally called Portal School, which later got nicknamed Hatchet House. Now, this schoolhouse, apparently, according to the story, there was a school teacher, and one day she just snapped. And she barred the door to the school so the children could not leave. And she took a hatchet and she killed all the children inside the school. And some say this happened and some say this didn't. But the main story goes that they were also decapitated and she left the heads on top of the desk for people to find later. But what everybody agrees on is that her students, she went around and she carved the hearts out of all the students. And she took all of the hearts and she went by over to a nearby bridge and dropped them off the bridge. And she went back to the school. My foot itches. Back to the school and killed herself. So he's telling me this story, and they say if you go out there, sometimes you can hear her banging around inside the school. If you go over to the bridge late at night, you can hear the beating of the hearts from where she threw the hearts over the bridge. So here we sit out in front of this school. Never did turn the car off. That's probably a good thing. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden the wind starts picking up. And then we start hearing loud noises coming from inside the school. And that, like, that wasn't bad enough. We never did make it over to the bridge and we never did get out of the car. Um, but then when we heard the loud thunk on the back of the car, that's when he looked at me and said, "We are getting out of here." And I was like, "Yeah, probably a good idea." So what happened later on, that school remained there um, until the 1990s, and I believe now the town bought it up and it is now in the town of Papillion, so you can go and see it, and they have it as like a historical building for people to come see. And but I don't know if the bridge is still out there in the rural part of the county or not. But that's not the only thing that happened in Papillion, Nebraska, because we're still in the 1980s, back in the day. Fast forward, and by this time, I had my son. He was still a little tiny tot, and one night I was supposed to take my younger brother to a Billy Squier concert, and really good concert, by the way. But back then, the concerts didn't get out until real late. So I had met my babysitter there in town, so I didn't have to drive all the way out to her house and then drive all the way back to Omaha to go to the concert. And so me and my brother went to the concert. The concert was over. It was about 11:30, quarter to 12. We had to make it from the Civic Center there in Omaha all the way back to Papillion in Sarpy County, down south. So here it's a little after midnight. And like I said, she lived out in a real rural area, cornfields, and just nothing is out there but for farmhouses. So we go down the road, and I'm like, I'm like, I know I'm on the right road, but I'm not finding her house. So we come up the road, and I see a light outside in on this one property. And so I told my brother that I was going to pull in and try to figure out, exactly where I'm at. And so I pulled in the front of the drive, and the front of the drive was very narrow, just enough for a vehicle to get by. And there's like drop off on both sides. So I barely get my car across that part over into the driveway. And there's a old farmhouse, just a little tiny farmhouse, and this big, huge wooden barn, old wooden barn. And outside the barn, on the top of it, was this light. And I pull up, and no sooner did I pull up, this old man in overalls starts walking towards the car. And he comes up to the car, and he was like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not sure." I go, "I'm trying to find this woman's house, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the right road, but I haven't run into it yet." And I told him her name, and he has said that he didn't know of anybody that lived down this road by that name. And I go, "Are you sure? Because I know it's got to be around here somewhere." And he looks at me, goes, "No, but why don't you come into the barn, and you can use the phone in the barn and try to call her?" That's when my brother, he freaks out. He's trying to be real calm. He's all bug-eyed, looking at me, grabs my arm, and he's just like, don't get out of the car. Don't get out of the car." So I'm looking at him, and I look back at the man, and I was like, "Thanks, but I think we're just gonna drive on down the road. And I'm pretty sure I'm on the right road. Maybe I just haven't went far enough." And he said, "Oh, well, why don't you just pull up into the drive? You can turn around and drive out." And I was like, "No, I'm I think I'm pretty good. I think I can just back out." And that's exactly what I did. And the whole time I'm doing this old farmer is standing there watching us. And we start going down the road, and he's still standing at the end of the property watching us go down the road. Well, sure enough, I don't even go down a quarter mile down the road, and there's her house. So I go inside. I'm sorry we're so late. I thought I had the wrong road, but I knew you were down here somewhere. And I told her that we had stopped just up the road, and this our encounter with this old man. And she looked at me, and her husband looked at me, and she was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We just left this farmhouse up the road, and they had never heard of you, so there was no help." And she said, "There's nobody that lives up the road." She said, "That farmhouse burnt down years ago." I was like, "There absolutely could not have been. We were just there." And she was like, I don't know where you were." but there's no house there. So I'm tired. It's late. Things are getting crazy. So I get my son in the car, my brother in the car, and we leave her house and go back down the road like we came. And we get a quarter mile down the road where the farmhouse was. And I look over, and the house, the old man, and that big old farmhouse with the light on was not there. The only thing that was there was a pile of old rubble and a notification. A pile of old rubble and an empty field. And to this day, I can't explain it. So there was a lot of, let me tell you, Nebraska is a really, there's areas there and there are people there, and it can be a real sinister place. Um, I spent 10 years there, and it's just some place I just never want to live again. But here I am in the middle of the Ozarks, and we've got our own tales. But I hope those were some fun stories of some things that actually did happen to me, of some very interesting places. And I hope everybody has a happy Halloween. And I will see you hopefully in November after this nightmarish election. Till next time.